After an accidental amnesia, I learned it that I had someone I really like. I asked my childhood friend who this person was, and he impatiently pointed to someone on the honor wall. He's your boyfriend, Wyatt, the most well-known aloof genius in the whole school. When I found Wyatt, he was teaching someone how to solve problems. Are you my boyfriend? He was taken aback, stared at me in silence for a moment, and finally nodded. Yes, I really doubt if your brain is functioning properly. How many times do I have to say it? I don't like drinking plain water. At a basketball court, Matthew looked at me with annoyance, but he still took the water I handed him. Just as he was about to open it, he got angry again. Why isn't it cold? On such a hot day, you're giving me room temperature water. His tone was harsh and loud, instantly drawing the attention of everyone present. But everyone was already used to the situation because everyone in school knows that I'm Matthew's devoted follower, always eager to bring him food and drinks, ask after him, and even go to the boys' dorm to do his laundry. You were playing basketball for too long, and the water got heated by the sun. I glanced at the nearby experimental building and casually explained, but Matthew was even more upset. So you're blaming me? He threw the water back into my arms. Idiot. Couldn't you stay in the shade over there? Why do you have to stand here? Matthew, I just wanted to see you up close. Don't you understand that? His friends behind him laughed and teased, looking at me with contempt. Matthew frowned. You guys don't get it. She never remembers my preferences. Either she brings me expired food or allergens. Every time she does my laundry, she ruins it. I've told her not to wash my expensive shoes, but she still insists. He grumbled angrily. But as soon as he saw the department flower Riley approaching, his expression changed instantly. Senior, Riley, the department flower of the art department, is also Matthew's goddess. Though a goddess, she's very approachable and never puts on airs. You guys are playing basketball here again. Yeah, Matthew spends every day playing basketball in this little worn-out court in the middle of the teaching building, pretending to run into Riley and indirectly getting to know her. Did you just finish practice? Saying this, Matthew suddenly tipped the water he had just complained about from me. Here, drink this. You must be thirsty after dancing. He often gives me things I brought him to Riley, whether it's water or snacks. Riley, without exception, accepts them all. Thank you. Junior, I'll treat you to a meal sometime. Hearing meal, Matthew's eyes lit up just as he was about to ask when they would go out for a meal. Riley suddenly looked up and said excitedly, Wyatt, are you done with your experiment? At the mention of Wyatt, Matthew's face darkened instantly. I looked up. In the third-floor classroom of the experimental building, a high, cold, and extraordinary-looking young man stood by the window, his gaze lightly focused on us. He was still meticulously dressed in his lab coat, which should have been ugly and bulky, but on him, it looked so good. He was so good-looking that I couldn't help but stare for a while. Maybe sensing someone was watching, he turned his gaze towards me, caught off guard by his deep, bottomless eyes. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly turned my head away. Actually, this wasn't the first time I had seen him. Whenever I came to find Matthew, I would usually see him. Matthew likes to follow Riley around, and since Riley frequents places where Wyatt is often present, I see him quite often. Riley cheerfully walked towards the experimental building. Senior, Matthew couldn't finish his sentence before she walked away, and he looked a bit dejected. One of his friends cautiously said, Matthew, maybe you should give up. Senior Riley obviously likes Wyatt. Otherwise, why would she, an art student, keep coming to the chemistry lab? Another one whispered, I heard they've known each other since childhood and are well matched. Wyatt is such a top student. Matthew can't stand hearing praise about Wyatt, and he got angry immediately. So what if he's a top student? He just acts all high and mighty. In frustration, he slammed the basketball against the backboard so hard that it bounced back and hit my head before falling unconscious. I vaguely heard someone anxiously calling my name, but it didn't sound like Matthew. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital, and I had lost my memory. Matthew told me that he was my brother. After my parents passed away, his family adopted me. Over the years, I grew up with him, and am now a sophomore in the chemistry department. He answered all my questions, but I always felt there was something important he wasn't telling me. It wasn't until 3 days later, when I returned to school and accidentally overheard Matthew and his friends talking, that I realized that I had forgotten I had someone I liked. I confronted Matthew about it right away. He was so annoyed with me that he pointed to a photo on the honor wall beside us. It's him. The person you like is Wyatt. I was stunned. Wyatt. The name sounded so familiar. Following his finger, I saw that the wall was filled with Wyatt's impressive achievements as a senior. He had accomplished so much in just 4 years at school, and according to the plaque, he had just won first place in a competition a few days ago. The person I like is him. Are you sure? Yeah. He looked indifferent, as if thinking of something. He added with a hint of a smile, actually, he's your boyfriend. Boyfriend? I had such an outstanding boyfriend. Yeah. He had a strange smile. Wyatt went to a competition out of town, a few days ago and just got back today. Why don't you go find him and ask? It's not that unsuspicious. But I felt Matthew's expression wasn't very friendly, as if he wanted to see me make a fool of myself. I went to find Wyatt, who was in a classroom surrounded by students, presumably answering questions. Since he was busy, I waited at the door for over 10 minutes, and they still hadn't finished. I hesitated whether to go in and interrupt, but it seemed impolite. But if he's my boyfriend, why should I be so cautious? Besides, as my boyfriend, shouldn't he care about me if I'm hurt? Classmate, I see you've been waiting for a while. Are you here to find Wyatt too? Someone suddenly called out loudly. Without thinking, I blurted out, I'm here to ask if he's my boyfriend. The moment I said this, Wyatt's pen fell onto the desk with a loud clatter. The room fell silent, and everyone stared at me, dumbfounded. Wyatt also looked at me in silence, his deep, beautiful eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't understand. Feeling embarrassed, I was about to explain when everyone burst into laughter. Someone teased, Junior, are you confessing? That's an interesting way to do it. I'll use it next time. Wyatt, I suddenly want to ask you too. Are you my boyfriend? A pretty girl asked Wyatt in a semi-joking tone. Testing him, Wyatt pressed his lips together, still looking at me. I took a step back, about to leave, but Wyatt suddenly stood up and walked towards me. Let's talk outside. The expressions of the people behind us varied before I could react. He pulled me out. We went into an empty classroom next door, and Wyatt closed the door behind us. His cold eyes fixed on me. What did you mean by that? Wyatt didn't seem like my boyfriend at all, and I suspected Matthew had played a trick on me. The thought made me so embarrassed that I couldn't look up. After all, he was a godlike figure, and here I was making a fool of myself. Looking down, I decided to honestly explain, I have a memory problem, and I mistook you for my boyfriend, so, sorry about that. Who told you I'm your boyfriend? Matthew. I paused. You don't know him, but he's also from our school. He just likes to joke around. Don't take it personally. I waited for a long time, but Wyatt remained silent. Curious, I looked up and saw him staring at me for a while before he nodded, yes. He wasn't joking. What does that mean? Wyatt took a step closer and looked at me seriously. I am indeed your boyfriend. I was stunned, unable to believe it. Really? But I'm sorry I couldn't visit you in the hospital. I had a competition. He knew I was in the hospital. He really does know me. Then why didn't you contact me? My phone was confiscated. Was the competition so strict that you couldn't use your phone for days? I looked him over with suspicion, but his serious and earnest expression didn't seem like he was lying. And given his status, there wouldn't be a reason for him to lie about being my boyfriend. Right. I don't have you on my Wicket list. I have an old phone and don't use Wicket. People still use old phones. I've never seen an old phone. I left it at home. Before I could finish, he interrupted. Seeing me staring at him, a hint of discomfort crossed his face. He turned away, cleared his throat, and changed the subject. Can I walk you back to the dorm? Without waiting for my response, he asked me to wait while he went to gather his things. In the next classroom, everyone looked at me and Wyatt with curiosity when we took so long to come back. Wyatt, what's your relationship with this Junior? Wyatt, while packing up, calmly replied, she's my girlfriend. His tone was unmistakably pleased, which made me feel inexplicably sweet. But when these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Girlfriend? When did you two get together? The latter question came from the door. Someone called out to her, Riley. It's been a while. Riley rushed in, looking at me incredulously, before turning to Wyatt and asking, why didn't I hear about this before? Well, now you have, Wyatt replied. Riley's face went pale instantly, and she was at a loss for words. My sixth sense told me that Riley might be my rival, but it didn't make sense. She was so beautiful. Why would Wyatt like me instead of her? On the way back to the dorm, I couldn't help but ask Wyatt. Before I could finish, he cut me off. Don't get the wrong idea. We've just known each other since we were kids. He paused and awkwardly patted my head. The person I've always liked is you, Maverick. I was taken aback, staring at him in surprise. This was the first time he had called me by my name. After a moment of silence, I said, I've lost my memory. I can't remember what happened before. I know, he said with a gentle smile. It's okay. You can consider today the first day of our relationship. My heart skipped a beat. On the day Wyatt walked me back to the dorm, news of our relationship spread throughout the entire school. That evening, he came back to take me out for dinner to celebrate my discharge from the hospital. My 3 roommates were even more excited than I was and begged me to bring them along. Consider this dinner as compensation for your secret relationship, they said. I had no choice but to awkwardly ask Wyatt if he could bring them along. I was worried he might be upset, but he seemed quite accommodating. I'd be happy for you to introduce your friends to me. My feelings suddenly became quite complicated. What's with this tiny sense of guilt? At the dinner table, I muttered quietly. My roommate Li Shu, sitting next to me, heard and turned around, asking, what did you say? Hearing this, the others, including Wyatt, all turned to look at me, caught by Wyatt's sincere gaze. I felt a bit guilty. It's nothing. Wyatt didn't press further, and kindly served me soup and dishes, all of which were my favorites, perfectly suited to my taste. How long have you known each other for? How does the senior know your preferences so well? My roommate's exaggerated and teasing tone made me signal to them to behave, but their next questions were even harder to handle. When did you start dating? Who confessed first? When was your first hand holding? Your first hug? Have you kissed yet? I was so shocked that my face turned red and then white. I hurriedly stuffed food in their mouths to stop them. Noticing Wyatt's smiling face next to me, I felt a bit embarrassed. They're drunk and speaking out of turn. Don't mind them. Of course I don't mind. On the way back, my 3 roommates were all drunk. It was just Wyatt and me, exchanging glances. As I struggled to think of a topic to ease the awkwardness, an old-fashioned phone suddenly appeared in front of me. I was a bit puzzled. Wyatt looked at me and explained gently. Didn't you say you hadn't seen an old phone before? Ah, so this was just for showing me. What's with this strange kink of yours? My roommate, still drunk, teased. I gave her a look, but didn't respond. I took the phone and examined it, hesitating. I asked Wyatt, isn't this phone too new to be an old phone? He looked momentarily stunned and suddenly pulled the phone away. I don't use phones much, so it looks new to me. Oh, the next day, however, Wyatt showed up with a brand new phone and suggested we connect on Wicket, saying it's more convenient to use. I looked at his phone with hesitation. Did you just buy this? Yeah, it doesn't look new though. It's second-hand. A top student who wins countless scholarships each semester, yet buys second-hand phones. I looked at him meaningfully, and he remained calm. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to use it properly, so I bought a second-hand one to try out first. Just then, his phone rang with a Wicket video call. He answered it smoothly. Professor, what's up? I just sent you a document. Take a look now. Okay. I raised an eyebrow, watching the so-called not good with phones person skillfully handle a video call while editing documents on his phone. Is this what being a top student means by not good with? When Wyatt and I arrived at the lab, it was packed with a large crowd. I suddenly regretted agreeing to come with Wyatt a few minutes ago. They were all wearing customized lab coats, curiously eyeing me like a group of penguins. The lab isn't open to visitors. Can you wait here? Wyatt's words were a relief. I really didn't want to go in. Wyatt was there to help his professor answer questions for these first-year students. Seeing Wyatt work seriously up close for the first time was a bit dazzling, so much so that I didn't react when Matthew's call came in for a while. It wasn't until Wyatt looked at me that I quickly answered the phone. Matthew, what's up? As soon as I spoke, I saw Wyatt frown slightly, worried that I was disturbing their class. I quickly moved away. Are you really with Wyatt? Matthew's tone was sharp, filled with disbelief. I replied calmly. Didn't you already know I was with him? Matthew was momentarily taken aback, then angrily said, do you know what his relationship with Riley is? And you're with him? Wyatt said they're just childhood friends. PFFT. What a jerk. Maverick, I suggest you break up with him. You're behaving like a third party. Riley has been so upset these days, losing weight over it. Riley has always been good to you. How can you steal someone else's man? Don't you have any shame? I know you're a simp, but I didn't expect you to be this much of one. When has Riley ever been good to me? Is this just an attempt to deceive me while I'm supposedly amnesiac? Unfortunately, I'm not actually suffering from memory loss. What are you talking about? I said. What gives you the right to order me around? Just because I'm your brother. You were raised by my parents since you were little. Heh. Maverick, you're really getting more and more unruly now that you've supposedly lost your memory. Have you forgotten how you used to do my laundry, wash my socks, clean my shoes, and bring me tea and snacks? I was too impatient to listen to him, and was about to hang up when I turned and saw Wyatt, who had somehow appeared without me noticing. He gazed at me with deep, inscrutable eyes. I frowned. And on the other end of the line, Matthew's furious voice came through again. You need to come see me right now. Immediately. After a moment of silence, I hung up quietly. Are you done with your lecture? Wyatt walked over slowly and stood in front of me. Who were you on the phone with? Matthew. Are you close with him? Not really. He's kind of like my brother. I grew up at his place. Just a brother. Wyatt's demeanor was a bit confrontational. I found it strange, and was about to ask more when my phone buzzed incessantly. It was Matthew texting. I'm at the dorm. You have 20 minutes to show up. Remember to bring me something to eat. No spicy food. No purified water. Get me some drinks. The drinks must be cold. Try bringing me room temperature drinks, and see what happens. Each message came with a commanding tone. I was used to it, and just looked at it. I had already planned how to annoy him. Got it. After replying to Matthew, I looked at Wyatt. I have other things to do, so I'll leave you to it. Continue with your class. His gaze dimmed slightly, and he forced a smile as if wanting to say something, but ultimately just nodded and said, okay. I didn't think much of it. I left the lab, and immediately went to the supermarket to buy food for Matthew. I bought carbonated drinks, wasabi bread from Little Days, and extremely spicy chips. Yep, all in Japanese. Perfect. I wasn't new to the boys' dorm and quickly found Matthew's room. I glanced at the nearby closed door as usual and then knocked on Matthew's door. He opened it with an annoyed look. Why did you take so long? But when he saw that I had brought food as usual, his expression softened. He took the bag from me. Come in. I raised an eyebrow and silently walked in, closing the door behind me. You need to call Wyatt and break up with him now. He tore open a piece of bread and took a bite. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he suddenly let out a scream. What the heck is this? He was coughing and searching for a drink in the bag, but when he opened it, the carbonated drink exploded out, filling his nose. He coughed until his face turned red and spent a long time in the bathroom to recover. When he came out, he started cursing me. I put on my usual innocent face. What's the matter? It's just some bread and drinks. This isn't bread. It's wasabi inside. I didn't know. I thought it was matcha. You did it on purpose. He paused and glared at me darkly. Did you shake the carbonated drink beforehand? Otherwise, how could it have exploded? You asked me to hurry, so I ran fast. Is that considered shaking? Are you an idiot? He was fuming, sitting by the bed. His stomach growled with hunger as he glanced at the remaining chips in the bag. When Matthew screamed for the third time, there was a knock on the door. His gaze dimmed slightly, and he tagged at the corner of his mouth as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, he just nodded and said, okay. I didn't think too much about it. I left the lab and immediately went to the supermarket to buy food for Matthew. I got some carbonated drinks, mustard bread from a brand called Little Life, and super spicy potato chips. Yep, all in Japanese. Great. I wasn't new to the boys' dormitory, so I easily found Matthew's room. I habitually glanced at the closed door next to his and then knocked on Matthew's door. He opened it, looking disgruntled. What took you so long? However, when he saw that I had brought food as usual, his expression softened a bit. He took the bag from me and said, come in. I raised an eyebrow and silently walked in, closing the door behind me. You need to call Wyatt and break up with him right now. He tore off a piece of bread and took a bite. Just as he was about to continue, he suddenly let out a scream. What the heck is this? He was spitting and searching for a drink from the bag. Unfortunately, when he opened the carbonated drink, it exploded out of the bottle and went straight up his nose. He coughed, turning red, and went to the bathroom to recover for a while before coming out. But as soon as he did, he started cursing at me. I put on my usual innocent face. What's the matter? It's just some bread and a drink. Is this bread? It's filled with mustard. I didn't know. I thought it was matcha. You did this on purpose. He paused, glaring at me. Did you shake the carbonated drink beforehand? Otherwise, how could it have sprayed out like that? You told me to hurry up because you were afraid of being late, so I ran fast. Is that considered shaking? Are you stupid? He was fuming, his face turning pale, and Saturday down by the bed. His stomach growled with hunger as he looked at the remaining potato chips in the bag. Just as Matthew screamed for the third time, there was a knock at the door. Seriously, what's going on with you two? It's so intense. I glanced at the person on the floor, in obvious distress, and smiled wryly. I had never met anyone as clueless as Matthew. He had been this way since childhood. Every time I played tricks on him, he fell for them again and again, always making it so easy. It seemed like he actually thought I was buying food for him to win his favor. But did he actually believe that? Once, he insulted me so badly that I was furious, and the result was that he had an allergic reaction to mangoes and ended up in the hospital. But this idiot still thought I was being unintentional. Maverick, I'm going to kill you. You're dead meat. Matthew lunged at me with gritted teeth. I took a few steps back, and the door behind me was opened by someone. I bumped into a chest. The familiar scent told me immediately who it was without even turning around. Are you okay? Wyatt looked a bit flustered as he looked me up and down, his brows showing concern. I smiled. I'm fine. If you're fine, I'm not. My boyfriend is here. If you have any issues, you should sort them out quickly. I won't disturb you anymore. Big brother. Ignoring Matthew's impotent rage, I took Wyatt and left. The next dorm was actually where Wyatt lived. When we closed the door, we could still vaguely hear Matthew's curses. I pretended not to hear and took a good look at Wyatt's dorm. What a coincidence. You live right next to Matthew. My gaze fell on a desk piled with unopened water bottles, drinks, and snacks. They all looked familiar, like brands I had bought before. What a coincidence. Just as I was about to lean in for a closer look, Wyatt suddenly grabbed my arm and said, his lips pressed together, "Are you and Matthew? Are you worried or jealous?" I interrupted, looking directly at him. He furrowed his brow. Both. I raised an eyebrow, unable to hide my delight. I was surprised that Wyatt liked me. Originally, I pretended to have amnesia just to mess with that fool Matthew, but unexpectedly, he tried to set me up by tricking me into thinking Wyatt was my boyfriend. With a give it a try attitude, I went to find Wyatt for the first time. I thought if it didn't work out, I could always say it was due to my amnesia, and it wouldn't be too embarrassing, but I didn't expect Wyatt to just go along with it. He actually liked me? Wyatt, do you really like me? He lowered his gaze. Yeah, when did you start liking me? I was genuinely curious about this. I had set up so many encounters before, and had never initiated a conversation with me. He lived next door to Matthew and shared a floor with him, using the same washing machine. Every time I saw him going to do laundry, I'd immediately take Matthew's best non-machine washable clothes to wash as well. I'd stand right next to him, but he wouldn't even glance at me. The only time he spoke to me was to say coldly, "This isn't a place for you." I thought he disliked me, but now, after I pretended to have amnesia, he says he likes me. When did you start liking me? Why the sudden curiosity about this? Can you tell me? It's not that. I leaned closer, my eyes shining. Then tell me quickly. My sudden closeness caught him off guard, and he frowned for a moment. After a while, he finally answered gently. 2 years ago. 2 years ago. I hadn't even started at this university 2 years ago. Did we know each other 2 years ago? I have amnesia, so I don't know. Tell me about it. You should go back. It's not appropriate for a girl to stay in a boy's dorm. It could affect your reputation. He pressed his lips together and looked at me seriously. I was a bit helpless. He was great in every way, but just as serious. I'll ask one more question. Answer it, and I'll leave. What question? I smiled mischievously. When was our first kiss? He suddenly frowned, staring at me blankly. His face seemed to flush slightly. I smirked. Is that too hard? If you're not answering, let's change the topic. Have we? I hadn't finished talking when suddenly everything went dark, and a wet sensation pressed against my lips. My brain went blank, and I forgot to blink or close my eyes. I don't know how long it lasted, until Wyatt finally pulled away. You can answer now. Our first kiss was just now. Hearing his voice, I slowly came to my senses, my face turning red, the blush spreading to the back of my neck. In the end, I forgot how I left the boys' dorm at night. But after that day, I had a new understanding of Wyatt. This person, who seemed so serious, could actually be quite wild when pushed. Also, if he were really so rigid and honest, he wouldn't have agreed when I pretended to have amnesia and asked if he was my boyfriend. Riley coming to find me was something I expected, but I didn't think it would be so soon. She looked at me squarely for the first time and got straight to the point. Maverick, I hope you break up with Wyatt. You're not suited for each other. You don't really know him. I smiled. Senior, asking someone to break up with their partner out of the blue isn't very nice. Besides, whether we're suited for each other or not isn't up to you. Before the amnesia, I was someone without much temper. She might not have expected me to speak so bluntly, and she was a bit surprised, and then even more angry. These young girls today have no manners. Involving yourself in other people's relationships isn't very moral, don't you think? Talking about morals, I have no manners. What moral principles are you talking about? Riley was left speechless with anger. After a long silence, she spoke again. Maverick, Wyatt isn't as great as you think. He's been lying to you. How so? I looked at her with a smile, curious about what she would say. You don't know because of your amnesia, but the person you really like isn't him. But isn't he my boyfriend? If I don't like him, who could I like? Everyone in the school knows that the person you like is Riley. Before Riley could finish her sentence, Wyatt suddenly appeared and interrupted her. His hair was a bit disheveled, and he was slightly out of breath as he walked over to me. Maverick, let me explain. No need to explain. I interrupted him. His face fell immediately. However, I took his hand and said, I believe you. Wyatt's eyes lit up again, and I looked at him seriously. And I'm sure that the person I liked before my amnesia is you. Upon hearing this, Wyatt's eyes showed a hint of hesitation, but in the end, he said nothing and took me away. It was my first time visiting Wyatt's off-campus apartment. I originally wanted a quiet place with no interruptions to explain the whole amnesia act to him, but it seemed like Wyatt didn't want to listen. The whole night, he kept finding excuses to avoid talking to me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Before bed, I pushed open his bedroom door. If you don't let me explain tonight, I'll stay here and not leave. He was silent for a moment before finally saying, all right, come here. I was taken aback for a moment, and then continued, I'm not joking. If you don't listen to me, I'm staying on your bed tonight. He suddenly got up from the bed, went to the door, and pulled me inside. With a decisive move, he picked me up and placed me on the bed. Fine. Stay. Go to sleep. Don't talk. Why won't you listen to me? Don't want to sleep. Want to do something else? He threatened. I didn't expect that. My eyes brightened. Really? He was at a loss for words. Thought you wouldn't dare. So let's talk properly. He sealed my words with a kiss, kissing me furiously as if he didn't want me to speak. After a long while, he buried his head in my neck, breathing heavily. Sleep now. I was incredibly frustrated. All right, we'll talk about it next time. However, before I had a chance to explain anything to Wyatt, he went off campus for a competition, and once he was gone, Riley came knocking. So, you really haven't lost your memory, have you? She came right out and asked. Her straightforwardness was actually something I quite liked. Matthew didn't notice, but you figured it out before him. Riley frowned. If you haven't lost your memory, why are you with Wyatt? Aren't you supposed to like Matthew? Who said I like Matthew? Everyone at school knows about it. Did I ever admit to it? Isn't it just them spreading rumors on their own? Riley was shocked, realizing something. Her eyes widened. So you've always liked Wyatt? Of course not, Matthew. That idiot. How could I ever like him? I looked disgusted, and before Riley could say anything, Matthew's voice came from behind us. Damn it, Maverick. What are you saying? How could you not like me? Everyone at school knows you're my lapdog. His tone was filled with arrogance and disdain. I couldn't help but shiver. Dude, saying that is pretty gross. We're siblings. How could his sister like her brother? That's incest. I'm a person with morals, and I don't do that kind of thing. Riley, Matthew, we don't even share blood. So what's with you getting all worked up just because I said I don't like you? Do you like me or something? No. Who likes you? Stop being so narcissistic. Don't stutter, Maverick. Matthew's face turned red with anger. I don't like you at all. Well, if you don't like me, why are you shouting? Feeling guilty. Matthew was so angry, he was trembling, pointing at me, and I slapped his hand away. Quit with the yo. You. It's all just your own narcissism. I've never said I liked you. How could you not have said it? All those gifts you gave me were labeled with your confessions, and had TT engraved on them. That's my initials. Are you sure those were meant for you? Matthew frowned, suddenly looking doubtful. Wyatt, also out, seeing that he was piecing it together. I looked at him with the same disdainful expression he always gave me. I'd seen narcissists before, but I'd never seen anyone as narcissistic as you. Look in the mirror, will you? How do you even compare to Wyatt? If I didn't like him, how could I like you? Am I blind? Matthew's face went from red to pale. But in the end, he said nothing, and just closed his mouth dejectedly. Riley, finally understanding, was furious. Maverick, you're so shameless. You used my hand to send things to Wyatt. Senior, you could have just not accepted the gifts Matthew gave you, but you always took them. Right in front of me. Did you consider my feelings as the person who gave them? Aren't you just thinking of yourself? As long as I act shamelessly, no one can morally shame me. Don't get too smug. Even if you used my hand to give things to Wyatt, in his heart, those things were from me, and that's why he accepted them. Senior, what's the point of you giving him gifts? In his heart, you're just the delivery person. What he likes is me. I shrugged innocently and provocatively, which made Riley, usually so gentle, turn vicious and bitter. Matthew was left dumbfounded. I'm going to expose your true colors to Wyatt. Go ahead. I'm not scared. Feeling victorious, I looked at her with satisfaction, but then she suddenly grinned strangely. I already did. She pulled out her phone, showing a chat window with Wyatt. I said, Senior, you're really devious. Ow. Do you want to hit me? Wyatt's still listening. No. I chuckled as I looked at her. I actually like it, Riley, but I didn't have time to worry about her. Wyatt's call came in. Come pick me up at the school gate. Okay, I replied unusually obediently. He had finished his competition today. When I arrived at the school gate, there were quite a few people, students, officials, and teachers surrounding him and his team. I stood on the outskirts, not stepping forward, but he saw me. I thought he would be angry that I lied to him, but instead, he walked right up to me in front of everyone and hugged me. I was genuinely stunned. After a moment of daze, I spoke. How did it go? If you do well, is there a reward? If you didn't do well, can I get a chance to explain? No need to explain. My heart sank slightly before I could say more. He leaned closer and whispered in my ear, I believe in you. I was taken aback. Familiar words, familiar scene, but this time it was him saying them.
I met Maverick during the summer of my sophomore year. She had just graduated from high school and was working a part-time job during the summer break. On scorching hot days, she wore a thick mascot costume and handed out flyers under the blazing sun. When she was tired, she would sneak off to buy cheap ice water and, after drinking it, return to handing out flyers with renewed energy. One time, a young girl bumped into her and falsely accused her of stealing her necklace. I had always seen her smiling every day and thought she was a gentle and easy-to-bully girl who would be scared and cry. To my surprise, she rationally cleared herself of suspicion and exposed the girl's deceit on the spot. Later, I found out that the girl was actually her classmate, who had a grudge against her and deliberately caused trouble because she found out Maverick was working there. Every day, I would sit in a nearby cafe, waiting for her to appear. But one day, no matter how long I waited, she never showed up. I thought I would never see her again in this lifetime. To my amazement, after the new school year began, I ran into her again on campus. It turned out she was a student at our school. You can imagine how happy I was. However, I soon noticed that she was always with a guy I vaguely recognized as someone who lived in the dorm next to mine. He was arrogant and had never shown her any respect when talking about her in the dorm. I really didn't like him, but it seemed like she liked him a lot, even making it well known around the school. Sometimes, when I saw her being humiliated by Matthew and not showing any emotion, I was genuinely upset. Did she really like him that much? Why wasn't she angry when Matthew gave the gifts she had given him to Riley right in front of her? I had never received anything from Riley, but after discovering that some of the gifts Riley gave away actually belonged to her, I didn't refuse them. I knew if I didn't accept them, Riley would just throw them away, and I didn't want her feelings to be tossed in the trash. Matthew probably never noticed that Maverick would engrave messages on the gift she gave him. "Mount, I like you. Mount, you're a big fool." There were many childish messages like this. It's a coincidence that my initials are also Mount, and I used to fantasize about how nice it would be if those messages were meant for me. As I watched the pile of things in my dorm with those inscriptions and felt consumed by jealousy, I couldn't do anything about it because she liked Matthew. But then, unexpectedly, there was a twist. She lost her memory and mistook me for her boyfriend. Actually, when she was injured, I was the first to pick her up and take her to the hospital. But she didn't know that. I left before she woke up. I've never been one to engage in petty behavior, but with Maverick, I deceitfully lied. For the first time, I was close to her, greedily enjoying her closeness, while anxiously waiting for the day I'd have to lose it. But that day never came, because, as it turns out, Maverick liked me too. That "Mount, you're a big fool" message was really meant for me. Thankfully, I didn't miss out. This story has ended. Feel free to subscribe to our channel to get the latest content and enjoy a large number of novels updated daily.